two umbrella bodies representing persons with disabilities, that is NASCO and Fort Peace. I would like also to acknowledge the presence of Dr. Christine Peta, the Director of Disability Affairs from the Ministry of Public Service, Labour and Social Welfare, as well as the Chairperson of the National Disability Board, Ms. Mercy Monganidze, who are also present today with us to testify to this signature ceremony. So colleagues and from the media, we are very pleased to welcome you to this ceremony that is made possible with the support of the Spotlight Initiative with the financial support of the EU. You know that the Spotlight Initiative aims at addressing gender-based violence in Zimbabwe, but also in many, many other countries in Africa. This particular flagship initiative, implemented by at least 6 UN agencies in this country, is really a flagship highlighting, spotlighting, as we can say, the issue of gender-based violence, the issue of gender norms that are hampering the participation of many persons in this country. And we all together would like to address all the barriers preventing many citizens from fully and meaningfully participating in the country's affairs and political affairs, economic empowerment, and also cultural fulfilling, conditions for everyone. So today, we are very, very pleased to be here in front of you, the media, to also highlight how much importance the civil society organizations are giving to the issues of empowering girls and women with disabilities, because we acknowledge the fact that they are suffering from intersectional discrimination and violence that is really compounding to make them more vulnerable to discrimination, to stigma, to violence across the board. So today is a very historical moment where the women's movement and the disability movement have come together to really strategize on common strategy, common approach to advance the rights and freedom of this particular vulnerable groups of population. So as the UN family, I'd like to say that as UNESCO, we are also very, very, we feel humble and privileged to be supporting this coalition building between the two movements. And we are also representing today the UN family at large and the Spotlight family to really serve this coalition moving forward and thriving as we build this coalition and synergize our efforts towards the same goal. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Leonard Marange, who is the director of Fort Peace, the Federation of Persons with a Federation of Organizations for Persons with Disabilities. Then we have Ms. Sally Ngube, who is the national coordinator of coalition of WICO's Women's Coalition of Zimbabwe. And we have Mr. Henry Messiah, who is the director of NASCO, the National Association of Organizations of Persons with Disabilities. Without further ado, I'd like to pass over the floor to them, each of them, to really highlight the strategic importance of their organization being part of this coalition building. Let's start with Mr. Oh, you're starting, sorry. With Ms. Sally Ngube.
Thank you, Kenneth. Good day, colleagues and honorable members of the media. So today marks a historic moment in the drive towards movement building on social inclusion in the country, as two movements join hands to address intersectional discrimination. Historically, the women's movement, in collaboration with other civil society organizations, has been working with marginalized groups and has successfully advocated for law and policy reforms in order to ensure that all forms of violence against women are addressed. Organizations of persons with disabilities in Zimbabwe have been at the forefront of advocating for disability rights and inclusion, with a specific focus on intersecting forms of stigma and discrimination that women and girls with disabilities face. Given the milestones of these two movements, there is need to build a coalition to address the intersectional discrimination. Women and girls with disabilities are usually left behind in gender-based violence interventions, and yet they face intersecting forms of discrimination at a higher level in comparison with other women who are also marginalized and at alarming rate of being affected by all forms of violence and discrimination. Inclusion of women with disabilities in initiatives that seek to end all forms of violence against women and girls in Zimbabwe is essential. However, there has been little interaction between the women's movement and organizations of persons with disabilities. So this has also affected the fight against intersectional discrimination, though the two share a common values, which include respect for diversity, solidarity, inclusion, and non-discrimination. In the context of organizations of persons with disabilities and the women's movement in Zimbabwe, we then have decided to establish a Memorandum of Understanding that would forge transformative coalition for change in the country. The two social movements have defined the main feature of our synergies and collaboration during the first workshop that was held in Women's Month on the 10th of March 2022. And today is this second workshop, which now seeks to validate and launch the Memorandum of Understanding, which we are doing in our Independence Month, very significant. That should facilitate learning opportunities and exchange experience in lobbying, advocacy, policy advocacy, engaging policymakers, duty bearers, and service providers for social inclusion, justice, and equality, which the two movements have accumulated over the years. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. This Memorandum of Understanding, emerging from the support of the European Union, funded Spotlight initiative, seeks to build a sustainable, transformative coalition for social change between organizations of persons with disabilities, FODPES, NASCO, and the women's movement led by the Women's Coalition of Zimbabwe. This Memorandum of Understanding will create a platform for both movements to undertake joint advocacy and capacity building initiatives, which include developing corporate disability and gender advocacy, and inclusion strategies in the respective movements, developing partnerships and the synergies in existing projects and programs which are aimed at ending violence against women and girls, especially those implemented at grassroots levels. Developing networks and alliances of women's rights organizations and organizations of people with disabilities at national and district levels, and raise awareness on gender-based violence, intersectional discrimination, and sexual and reproductive health and rights and disability inclusion. Indeed, we are excited at this occasion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone from different media houses. Yes, in order to implement and sustain the provisions of this MoU, the three parties commit to build a joint advocacy strategy to mobilize the government, CSOs, the development partners, and the private sector to support their key areas of focus on addressing the intersectional discrimination facing girls and women with disabilities. Such a strategy includes joint policy dialogues with the different stakeholders, such as the government, donors, and the private sector, and technical partners, negotiating joint participation in governance structures, such as the SDG Technical Committee or the National Development Strategy Coordination Mechanisms, submitting joint proposals to donors, and mobilizing the respective networks and constituencies at all levels for social movement building around the agenda of fighting intersectional discrimination. Indeed, this is a historic moment for us. Thank you very much, organizers, for this.
Thank you very much for highlighting and outlining all these provisions of the MoU. At this point in time, I'd like to invite my colleagues to bring in the MoU documents for the official signing ceremony. And then we'll proceed with the question and answer session with you to clarify any points you might need on this event. Thank you.
That is 2 days, 7.
6.
think we're nearly there.
Yeah.
Almost.
So I think Lutza, you can give to each one so that we can show to the media. Right. So at this point in time, I think we have completed the signature on the 3 copies of the MoU. And to symbolize the partnership, solidarity, and synergy, I think we need a picture with the 3 copies of MoU. I think you can just show the cover page, and that should be okay.
Cover page.
Okay.
Don't close the face.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mr. Malange, Ms. Nube, and Mr. Messiah, for this signature that marks a new chapter in the coalition building and synergizing between the 2 movements. Let me now open the floor for questions from the media and also interactions with you, because this is a very privileged moment that we have. Over to you. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. My name is Byron Timothy. I'm the editor of SlyMedia Online Media. I would like to ask how much is involved in terms of finances and what's the duration of the MoU? Thank you.
All right. Any other question from the room, the media? Yes.
Thank you very much. My name is Ruth Romaway. I'm a freelance journalist. Please allow me to ask my question in Shona because I would also want the answer in Shona. National Kuzwa from Sali and the Fijian women. But in terms of statistics, Singati Mazmai, Anora Ramane Urema, Akusangana Nendozi Shakati, Yeje Kapesfai. And Shakare Shi, Jambusa Kula Nasho.
Anyone else? Otherwise, I propose we move these to the high table. Yeah.
Okay, I am going to address Brian Mutemerere. Or Mutingwende, sorry about that. Okay, you asked about the duration of this MoU. The MoU is going to run for a period of 5 years. Yeah, initially.
The budget, is there a budget, specific budget to say so many thousands or millions are forwarded towards the MoU?
Okay, maybe I can say at the moment we wouldn't come up with a budget. We are going to do that once we do our strategic, plan jointly, our joint strategy, and then the issue of resources will naturally come into play. So yeah, we hope to budget for this MoU to see the day. Thank you.
Would you like to take on question?
Rutendo, pane kudzidzwa kwakaitwa kwakawanda pamusoro pedambudziko remadzimai akaremara nevanasikana, nyaya dzekumanikidzwa pabonde nenyaya dzakarerekera ikoko. UNESCO rimwe bato rakanyorwa zvinyorwa pamusoro pazvo. Kune nzvimbo dzakaitwa programs Spotlight Initiative, kune huwandu hune chitsama hwemadzimai akaremara vari kusangana nedambudziko irori. Chinongonetsa ndechekuti hazvikwanisiki kuti munhu anoita program akavhe nyika yese. Hakuna kukwanisa kukavha nyika yese kuti tione kuti muma 10 provinces ari muZimbabwe, muprovince imwe neimwe vangani madzimai ari kutambudzwa nenyaya idzodzo, muprovince imwe neimwe vangani madzimai ari kutambudzwa nenyaya idzodzo. Zvinhu zvatinoda kuti dai zvange zvichiitika paine hurumende ichigona kupa mari dzekuti zvinhu zvakadaro zviongororwe muprovince imwe neimwe, tingagone kunga tichikwanisa kukutaurirai kuti vangani madzimai ane dambudziko iri. Asi tikaenda munzvimbo dzatiri kuita urongwa hwemadzimai, ungangoti half dzemadzimai akaremara dziri kusangana nedambudziko iro. Asi chandinoda kuti ndigadzise ndechekuti zvingagoni kusiyana munzvimbo nemunzvimbo. Kunzvimbo dzakaita dzekumaruwa dambudziko iroro rakakura kupfuura nzvimbo dzakaita dzemumadhorobha. So hatigoni kuti zvatakaona uko, namba dzatakaona kumaruwa ndidzo namba dziri muno mumadhorobha. Chinhu chinoda kutoti patotsvagwe mari yekuongorora namba dzacho kuti dzakamira zvakadii.
Maita basa ndinoda kuti zvekare ndidzikise pakuti mubatanidzwa watavamba zuva ranhasi wakanangana nekuti tiite mubatira pamwe kuti tigozoita tsvagurudzo dzinobata nyika yese. Ndinodayira kuti mukatarisa mabazi akaita seUnited Nations nevamwe vanoita mubatira pamwe nehurumende kuti vaite census, vaite zvekare inonzi Zimbabwe Vulnerability Assessment. Saka mutsvagurudzo dzakaita seizvozvo kubudikidza nemubatanidzwa wataita pari zvino, pachatoda kuti titarise kubva kuna Zambezi kusvika kuna Limpopo kuti patoita tsvagurudzo inoita kuti pave nechibatwa kana chinyorwa chinonyatsokubuditsa ruzivo rwakakwana pamusoro peZimbabwe nenyaya dzestatistics dzamataura kudai zvino, kuti pari zvino sezvataurwa navamasaya dziri muchidimbu zvichienderana nenzvimbo dzakasvikirwa, asi kazhinji dzishoma nene dziri kunge dzichizosvika kumatare, nekuti dzatinozoti statistics ndedzinenge dzaripotwa. Saka kune matambudziko atiri kusangana nawo ekuti vashoma vari kuzokwanisa kuti vakwanise kunoripota nyaya dzemhirizhonga dzavari kusangana nadzo kubudikidza nenyaya dzetsika nemagariro dzevamwewo vanovhunduka kuti kana vakasangana neurema hwemumhuri mavo vanohugamuchira sei uye zvii zvingadiwa, nezvimwe zvikwanisiro zvinoita kuti madzimai nevanasikana vanenge vawirwa nenyaya dzemhirizhonga vakwanise kuti vaende kumapurisa, nekuti dzimwe nzvimbo chikamu chenzendo dzinofanira kuti dzifambirwe, rubatsiro runoda kuti munhu wacho aende kunoripota. Dzimweni dzenguva chero iye ari kumuchengeta wacho ariye amushungurudza kuti akwanise kuzviendesa ega. Ndezvimwe zvinhu zvatiri kutarisira kuti mubatanidzwa wataumba nhasi uchagadzirisa matambudziko akaita seiwayo. Kuna Byron, who have asked about the duration of the MoU, we have just tentatively put it at 5 years, but it has as a routine where we are going to be reviewing, and it is renewable. So it's not a relationship that is like a project, because people's lives are not projects. We are looking into this as a long-term relationship that we are co-creating, but being mindful that we need to put timelines for reviewing, reflecting, and connecting with the work and do it better. So it is a living partnership that will be reviewed in different times. Saka mavunza kuti zvi zvatiri kumboda kubuda nazvo panyaya yemubatanidzwa wataita zuva ranhasi. Chekutanga ndechekuti mukutobatana tiri tese kwanga kuri tite chirwirangwe, tite mubatira pamwe nekuti nyaya yatiri kufamba nezvayo inyaya inotibata tese semasangano. Tigopawo panyaya dzekudzidzisana, kusimbisana paruzivo, maitiro ekuti basa ratichada kuti tiite tese ringe richiendeka nekuti tine unyanzvi hwekusimudzira kurwira nekukoshekedza kwekodzero dzevanasikana nemadzimai vanorarama neurema. Koita nyaya yetsvagurudzo yatataura nezvazvo. Koita kana takatarisa mitemo yedu yeZimbabwe, kubva pamitemo inobata kumaruwa, mumakanzuru, kudare reparamende, nemitemo yatakaisawo zvisungo munharaunda dzedu tiri munyika nezvisungo zvinotibata tiri paSADC nekuAfrica Union nekuUnited Nations. Tine zvibvumirano zvatakanyorawo nezvatakaita zvisungo senyika yedu yeZimbabwe. Saka mubatanidzwa wanhasi uchatarisa kuti Zimbabwe iri mukati mezviitiko nezvisungo zvepasi rese zvinosimudzira kodzero dzevanhu vanorarama neurema uye kuenzaniswa kwemikana pakati pevanhurume nevanhukadzi nekodzero dzese dzevanhu dzakazara dzakakwana kudaro. Saka rimwe basa ratichange richiita nderekutarisa mitemo, nderekutarisa masangano anoshanda, nderekutarisa zvekare vanonzi maservice provider, kana kuti munhu nemunhu ane basa or ane chekuita kuti mitemo, upenyu, kuwanikwa kwezvikwanisiro, kusvikirawo zviwanikwa zvenyika yeno iyi, vanasikana nemadzimai vanorarama neurema vakwanise kuti vazvisvikire. Zvadaro tikatarisa kodzero dzinodawo kuti ivo vane kodzero dzacho vadzinzwisise, vadzizive, vadzisvikire. Saka paine basa guru ratichaita mubatira pamwe takanangana nenyaya yekuti tizivise ruzhinji rweZimbabwe, tizivise madzimai nevanasikana vanorarama neurema kodzero dzavo, nekuti masangano anoita basa iri asimbiswe mukuita basa ravo kuitira kuti riendeke. Ndinodaira ndakwanisa kuti ndipindure kana pane chasara tiripo kuti tiwedzere.
Thank you so much for the questions and also for the indications of some answers here. So, colleagues, we have to continue the celebration, and we have lunch waiting for us all. So I'd like to check whether you have any last final pressing question before we break and celebrate together during lunch. I'd like to also indicate that my colleague Sirak, who is supporting the communication part, and I thank him for that, he will also send to you the press release that has been used for this event as well. All right, two last questions here. Thank you.
I would like to ask about the safe houses. Projects like to Sasa houses for people and safe houses for different. So are you going to keep those skills to be able to use skills like that?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
How are you going to help those girls who are victimized by their relatives?
Okay, another question here that I come to.
Thank you. My name is Patricia from Star FM. I just want to find out how you also plan to work with faith healers and traditional healers, because we find that some other problems or challenges that persons with disabilities face are also concerned with cultural values and norms. How then are you going to be addressing that under this or through this MoU? Thank you.
Thank you so much. And then the last question here. Yeah?
It's not important. I just wanted to know if there were any specific government departments that are directly involved in this MoU.
Thank you for that. So let us have a last round of replies from the high table.
Okay, I'm going to deal with the second question that came from my colleague from Star FM. The issue of faith healers and traditional healers, that's what I'm going to deal with. As part of our strategy, we wanted to engage community leaders, and these community leaders also include our traditional healers and our faith healers. We want to target them by way of spotlighting issues around disability and gender, with a particular focus on the underrepresented and marginalized groups within that subpopulation group. We also want to raise awareness to these communities in our engagements, so that we demystify negative stereotypical perceptions about disability. So they are an important cog of the target group that we are going to pay attention to in order to overcome some of the barriers, particularly attitudinal barriers, that are pervasive in our communities and society at large. So my colleagues are going to deal with other two questions. But as for the other question relating to those that we are working with in government, we are working with our ministry, our different government ministries, but in particular, we will be working with the Minister of Public Service, Labor and Social Welfare, and in particular, the Department of Disability Affairs. We will also seek to work with other arms of government, which include the legislature and also the judiciary. So this whole thing is targeted at the whole government. So we will use what they now call the whole government approach in our focus, because government is a key duty bearer. So we want to ensure that all government ministries, across all ministries, are also engaged when it comes to these issues that we have signed this MoU for. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sally. In our initiatives to prevent sexual reproductive health rights violations, gender-based violations, we realized that we need to raise awareness to the community on the rights of people with disabilities. And it is our belief that once the community accepts that people with disabilities, including women and girls with disabilities, have rights that have got to be respected, rights that have to be looked after, then it will be possible to mitigate against violence against women and girls with disabilities. So we believe that awareness raising is very, very important. Awareness raising amongst the community, because people with disabilities don't live in isolation. We also have tried to bring the Department of Social Development closer to the community, because it has various services that it renders to people with disabilities in general. So we believe that when the community is enabled to interact with that department, then there will be possible assistance to mitigate against caregivers who violate the people they look after. But most important is the raising of awareness on the need to respect and appreciate the rights of people with disabilities.
So also the organizations that are signing this MoU are membership-based networks. They also have very active referral pathways which act as a rapid response infrastructure to service the work that this MoU have committed to. So I would like to share that as a country, we also have a violence against women and girls response mechanism which targets 4 pillars. There's an issue of prevention. There's an issue of participation, making sure that women and girls affected, they also have platforms and spaces for their voice to be heard, and for them also to speak out and be supported to access justice and safety mechanisms. So Musasa that you have mentioned and other organizations are also part of the Women's Coalition of Zimbabwe referral pathway, and they provide, for those that will need shelter support, they will access shelter support. Those that require medical support, they are also members within the 3 networks who will be able to provide practical medical support when in need. Issues of access to justice in terms of legal aid and logistical support through the access to justice process, court, reporting, prosecution processes, we have the expertise of some of our members who provide that. Then some also facilitate mediation amongst families, because there are the cases of violence against women and girls, they are not the same. Some require engagement, some require some family-to-family support mechanism. So the family unit, or where people stay, is the starting point for safeguarding. So we even have a community infrastructure of child protection committees that the government have also put in place. So I would say some of the things that will sustain this work is the partnership and ensuring that the referral pathway that is from community to national, even within hospitals and clinics, are supported adequately. Then others look into life after being violated in terms of making sure that the circumstances that made women and girls vulnerable in the first place are addressed. So there are also other partnerships with men-driven networks who look into transforming gender masculinities and men and boys engaging them as champions to end gender-based violence. So there are also avenues where we look into men and boys and other perpetrators who may be parents or other colleagues, and in schools programs around addressing issues of bullying in school. Then issues of livelihood support post for the survivors of violence, and ensuring that even the perpetrators or those that affect each other, they are supported. Regarding the question on the faith-based and traditional lists, our MoU is also anchored on building strong partnerships in line with sustainable development goals. So there is partnership with faith-based network. We have got the Zimbabwe Council of Churches, the EFZ. We also have Yuda Caesar, which is a collective from the apostolic sects. And interestingly, there are developments where we have association of women in the apostolic sects and women in Mbatanizwa and groupings in churches who are also creating spaces. And we have seen progress in our previous engagements that they are also transforming the children-based programs in churches to look into the issue of safeguarding and rights. With the traditional list, they are also inroads where, like what have been shared by my colleagues, we are going to engage community leaders, traditionalists, so that there is a partnership in preventing and working with the Chiefs Council, because as traditional leaders, they've made progressive commitments in issues to end child marriages through the Marriages Act that have just been passed by both houses and are waiting the ascending from the president. So we would like to reassure stakeholders that it's work that we are going to do not alone as 3 organizations or networks, but taking in the already established resources, assets, expertise that this country have put in place to establish a robust referral pathway for responding to all forms of violence against women and girls. And with government departments, persons with disabilities are full citizens of this country with full rights. They cannot be categorized. So all members of government, all structures of government, from community to national, regional, and international level, together with the Chapter 12 institutions, who are independent institutions charged with duty and mandate to make sure that there is implementation of the Constitution provision, specifically Section 56 on equality and non-discrimination, will also be the ones that we work with. And media is going to be also a strategic partner as we move with this work that we are committing to. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I just want to add, my name is Dr. Christine Petter. I'm the Director of Disability Affairs in the Ministry of Public Service, Labour and Social Welfare. And in relation to the MoU that has been signed today, the Department of Disability Affairs in the Ministry of Public Service, Labour and Social Welfare, which is led by Honourable Minister Professor Paul Mavima, has the mandate of overseeing the National Disability Agenda, which includes women and girls with disabilities. The Department of Disability Affairs works closely with UNESCO and the wider UN family under the Spotlight Initiative in relation to issues that affect women and girls with disabilities. Historically, I may say the women's movement, represented here by the Women's Coalition of Zimbabwe, and also the disability movement, represented by NASCO and Forward Peace. Those are the two umbrella organizations of persons with disabilities in Zimbabwe. Their coming together is very significant because by not working together, we risk having a women's movement that is moving forward without women and girls with disabilities, and a disability movement where the voice of women and girls with disabilities may not be prominent. So this MoU signing is very significant. I also want to say that on 9 June 2021, His Excellency the President of the Republic of Zimbabwe launched the National Disability Policy of Zimbabwe. The MoU that is being signed today represents in part implementation of provisions of that National Disability Policy, which is a section that is dedicated to women and girls with disabilities. The Department of Disability Affairs looks forward to working closely with the Women's Coalition and to continue to work with the two umbrella organizations of persons with disabilities in pushing forward the national agenda which relates to women and girls with disabilities, which includes reduction, as has been discussed or mentioned by my colleagues before. Disability increases the vulnerability of women and girls to sexual and gender-based violence, which includes sexual abuse. For example, deaf women are unable to scream for help, and blind women may not see the perpetrator. So this MoU and the partnership, which also includes government, will go a long way in addressing such issues so that together we uphold the principle of the Sustainable Development Goal of leaving no one behind. Thank you.
With those words, thank you so much, colleagues, for your time, your participation, and I'd like to really invite you to continue the conversation with the key stakeholders here during lunchtime. So I'd like to thank